Hey everyone, Bill Lethman here for Money Evolution. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about cash flow. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about how your cash flow could likely be changing, not only in the years right after you retire, but also in the years before you retire. And I'm going to be talking about some things you can do to take advantage of how that cash flow is going to be changing in those prior years before retirement, and also some things to look out for as you go into retirement, and maybe uncovering what some of those larger retirement gaps are going to be, meaning maybe larger withdrawals from your retirement portfolios. But real quick though, before I get into the content of today's video, if you're watching this and you're thinking, hey, I've got some additional questions, or I want to learn a little bit more about what you do at Money Evolution, we've got some links right down in the description below. There you can get access to our Retirement Time Machine Quick Start, completely free. It's a great place to begin to start organizing your retirement and figure out some of the basic things that you should be thinking about as you go into retirement. If you're ready to advance from there, we have our Retirement Time Machine program where you can really take a deep dive. That's sort of a DIY financial plan. And we also have our comprehensive plan that's done with me called Wealth Visual, where we're going to take you step by step through creating an entire financial plan and answering all of those really important questions for your retirement. So check those links out below, and we'll get back into the video. Okay, so one of the first things I think that you need to do to really understand your cash flow is to sort of create a little bit of a roadmap. This is something I've talked about in many other videos. I've oftentimes referred to it as a timeline. So regardless of what you're doing with your financial planning, whether or not you're using some software like we use, I think this is always a really great place to begin. And I think one of the first things we want to understand is what's going on right now with your financial situation. What are all the things that you have coming in as income, probably a paycheck or some income coming in from a business, and what are some of those expenses, and really understand what your current cash flow is likely going to be. And then kind of fast forward that out into the future and say, okay, if I want to retire in 10 years, let's say at age 65, what's going to change? So one of the things that's definitely going to change for most people is you're going to not have a paycheck. And I think that's one of the big things that a lot of people worry about when they're planning retirement is they're thinking about, hey, I've got all this money coming in right now, and I seem to maybe just be kind of getting by with my expenses. How is that going to work when I don't have that paycheck anymore? And what am I going to live off? Of course, hopefully you've been saving money for a long time, and you've got some money built up in 401k plans and IRA accounts. And so the idea is obviously you're going to be living off of some of that. You're also likely going to have, and it may not be at 65, you may turn on Social Security at your full retirement age, which for probably most people watching this would be age 67. You could turn it on earlier. You could actually turn on Social Security as early as age 62, but I think 67 is sort of a good starting point that I think for many of us that's going to make a lot of sense. But if we look here too, we have some other things probably going on maybe in our current situation, maybe some things that we won't have in retirement. For example, if we have a mortgage on our house, it could be that that mortgage is going to be paid off. Maybe it'll be paid off before retirement, or maybe it'll be paid off maybe some years into retirement, but you're likely not going to have that mortgage payment for the rest of your life. Another big one is any kids-related expenses. So if you have kids and maybe they're involved with travel sports or activities at school, theater, dance, even just the day-to-day things, giving them lunch money and things like that, at some point, hopefully those kids are going to be off on their own and they're not going to be relying on you for support anymore. So you could kind of identify and look at what some of those kids' expenses are and then say, hey, at some point we're not going to have those. At retirement, if you've got maybe medical covered by your work, you may have to go out and look for some type of a medical plan. At 65, that's going to probably be Medicare, but before 65, if you're planning on retiring prior to that, you're likely going to have to do something like maybe go out into the Affordable Care Act, those exchanges for some health care coverage. So you're going to want to maybe look at all of this and really understand not only what is my budget today, but what is that budget going to be likely to be in the future. You may have some increases to expenses here. Maybe you want to travel more as you go into retirement. So that's one thing there. Maybe you're planning on a move. That could be a downsize. So you may be looking at a reduction in expenses from going from what your current housing situation is today to something maybe that's a little bit less expensive. You may be moving from a state that has taxes to a state that has no taxes. So those are all the things that you want to look at and consider and really kind of identify that. And then what I want to do here is we're going to look at the software that we use, and I'm going to show you how we kind of map this out using the EMoney financial planning software that we use not only for our Wealth Vision clients, but also for the Retirement Time Machine, helping people build their own DIY financial plan. Okay, so let's jump into the software here. So this is the EMoney financial planning software. Again, the same software that we use for our high-end financial plans, and also the same software we use to help you build your own plan using that Retirement Time Machine program here. So up on the screen, we have our cash flow report, and what we're going to do is see how we can show some of these different inflows and outflows as you go into retirement and before retirement. And so when we look at our cash flow report, the first thing we can see here is that we have two graphs up at the top. The one on the left is just going to give us a quick visual representation of money coming in versus money going out. And we can see there by that green line, that's our money coming in. And I can make that bigger. And we can see while we're working, we have a little bit more money coming in than it's going out. That's obviously pretty typical. Hopefully that's your situation or most people's situation. But what we see here is we see some larger gaps as you go into those early years of retirement. And that's because maybe you retire a little bit before, maybe Social Security kicks in, or maybe you're waiting for a pension to kick in. Maybe you have some higher expenses still for a little bit. And then eventually, for a lot of people, what starts to happen is that cash flow starts to catch up. Maybe that's because of the Social Security benefits that kick in. The other thing that comes in here too is it's planning for your required minimum distributions, which depending on what year you were born is either age 73 or age 75 when you're required to start taking money out of your portfolio. So that's all kind of mapped out here. And then the one on the right is really going to show us probably the most important thing in the whole financial plan, and that's really what is projected to happen to your assets over time. Now when we do these financial plans, we usually use a pretty conservative growth rate, something like 5% for a long-term growth rate for the portfolio. And so we can see here for Steve and Sandy Bishop, they have some pretty good growth in their assets, not only before retirement, but also as they go into retirement. And we can sort of see that visualized here, where we can see their assets ramping up a little bit more quickly in the years before retirement, maybe dipping down a little bit in early retirement because of those bigger cash flow gaps, and then continuing to grow as some of that cash flow sort of normalizes here. But what this is really great at is when we start getting into some of the numbers, we can start to really visualize and see all of those different moving pieces here. So we can see the bishop's income coming in there, $160,000, pretty good salary. Yours might be higher than that, yours may be lower than that. This is just a hypothetical case study example. They are age 55 and 53 right now and planning to retire at age 65. So we can see that drop off there from their income going to basically just a baseline $15,000, and that's a pension that we have put into the system. So you can add all of this stuff, or if we're doing the plan for you, we would have that all built out for you. And then we can also see those expenses happening as well, and we can see how those expenses change over time. Now, Steve and Sandy, they have a couple of kids. They're 13 and 16 years old, so still a little bit on the younger side there. We added some expenses for some travel soccer and travel hockey that they're paying maybe about $9,000 a year in total. I don't know if that seems reasonable, but we had our kids in travel sports, and I know that stuff can get pretty expensive. That maybe seem low to some people. It may seem very high, but you may have other expenses related to kids that might be added into that. So what we can do is we can go into this total expense column, and then we can start to really see, you know, what that whole breakdown is. So we see some basic living expenses, like maybe for just food and groceries and entertainment, dining out, that type of thing. And then our liability payments. So like I said, one of the things that hopefully would happen at some point is if you have a mortgage right now, hopefully that mortgage would be paid off at some point. So their mortgage will be paid off just before they're 60. They also have some real estate expenses. We actually identify those and list them out as a separate category. That would be property taxes and insurance and things like that, so you can see what that is. And the reason we do that is because if you're thinking of moving and either downsizing your house or upsizing your house, whatever that may be, we can very easily identify what those expenses are related to the house and then just swap them out for a new house. And then we have some other expense flows. in there, and that's going to be some of those things that we talked about. So they currently have a family health insurance plan that they're paying quite a bit of money for right now. They have a couple lease payments there. They have some travel hockey, like I said. Sarah's got soccer. Those are their hypothetical kids' names there. We have a wedding planned in there as well. And then we have some pre-Medicare expenses for the two of them, and also some Medicare expenses. So we can see how that sort of evolves and changes a little bit over time. We can go back to the cash flow. And really the big takeaway here is we're going to identify a couple things. So if we look at this second to the right column there, net cash flow, we can see right now in 2023, hypothetically, they're just about breaking even with their income versus expenses, and there's not really a whole lot left over from what they have put into the software here. But I think we have one of the kids' soccer, hockey expenses dropping off at the end of this year, so their cash flow starts to improve a little bit. And then, like I said, eventually that mortgage drops off there, I think in about 4 years, and you can see the big jump there as they go into that. And you can see how that changes a little bit. And what that is going to do, I think, is help you to identify some of those opportunities. So for Steve and Sandy, they're in really good financial shape. And so maybe they don't really need to save any more money. Maybe they could be looking ahead and saying, hey, with that extra cash flow, we can do some travel, some nice trips, help the kids out a little bit with some things, and use that cash flow, because they really, based on what's in here, they don't really need to save any more money. In fact, we actually have their saving built into this, and I think right now we just have them doing $25,000 a year going into their 401k. They certainly could use that extra cash flow to save more money, but it should be looked at in the context of what is that extra savings going to do for you? What are the benefits of that? Are you going to spend a whole lot more money in retirement? Are you going to forego things today so that you can spend more money later? And I guess for some people that may be the case, but those are the things that you'd want to evaluate and maybe say, hey, maybe we don't need to save as aggressively as we thought. The other thing we could look at is we could look at them possibly changing their retirement date and say, hey, this looks really good. Let's say we want to bump that retirement from 65 to age 60. And so we can come over here to our goals section. There's a Monte Carlo built into this, and it's telling them that they have currently 100% probability of meeting their goals. They're in very good shape for that. But if we wanted to bump that retirement goal, and we said instead of retiring at age 65, we put in 60. We can see what that looks like. And that should populate here in just a second there. So that may be a little bit too aggressive. They only have a 60% chance of meeting that goal. So these are sort of the things that you can play around with a little bit and say, okay, well, 65 looked really good, but age 60 didn't. One of the things that goes into that earlier retirement is some bigger healthcare expenses, because if you retire prior to Medicare, you're going to have to go out into the exchanges and get some of that healthcare on your own. So we could, of course, look at, well, what if we change that retirement from age 60 to 62? We could come back over to our cash flow report, and we could say, okay, well, maybe now would be a better time to start saving some money. So we could say, with that extra cash flow that's coming in for the next couple of years, we could use that money, maybe open up some Roth IRA accounts, help them save in a different area, build that up, evaluate the portfolio, or evaluate their expenses. So there's really a handful of things that you can really change if you're finding that your retirement goals are a little bit off track from where you want them to be. So you could change the date of your retirement. So if, let's say, Steve and Sandy really wanted to retire at age 60, and we said, hey, that's only a 60% probability, that's a lot lower than we'd like it to be. So one of the things we could do is say we could bump that retirement out, maybe to 65, maybe it only has to go to 62 or to 63. So that's one option, change our retirement date. Second option would be to change our spending. So we could say, okay, well, instead of spending whatever we had in there, $36,000 a year on just your lifestyle expenses, maybe we could bump that down to $30,000. Sometimes even just a somewhat small change in that could have a pretty big impact on what those probability numbers are going to be. We could look at saving more money. As you get closer to retirement, that's something that's not going to generally have as much of an impact. If you're a lot younger, of course, if you save just incrementing a little bit more, that's going to have huge impacts over time because you've got more years to let that kind of build up and everything. But but yeah, you could change the amount you're saving towards your retirement. Rate of return is another one. So we like to be very conservative with our estimates when we're planning this stuff out, but you could change that rate of return. That's something we don't really obviously have a lot of control over. The markets are going to do what the markets are going to do, but you could play around with that a little bit and maybe have it in the back of your mind saying, okay, hey, we're going to target an early retirement. Maybe we need a little bit more aggressive of a return, but be willing to change that a little bit if you had to. So if you needed to back off a little bit on some of those goals or spend a little bit less in some years because of the rate of return, that's something that you'd want to be a little bit more flexible on there. Now, the other big thing we can take away from this cash flow report that we have here is we can look at what those cash flow gaps are in those early years of retirement. So again, I think this is still the earlier one with Steve retiring at age 60 instead of age 65. But what we can identify here are what those negative cash flows are going to be in those early years. So they're projecting here, based on his assets and the hypothetical situation, that he could have $1,570,000 at retirement, but he's going to be withdrawing over $100,000 a year for really probably the last the first 8 years of retirement. So $122,000 in the first year of retirement, $104,000, $108,000, $113,000. So that's going to give us our roadmap for helping us build out that retirement withdrawal strategy, something I've talked about in other videos. My recommendation generally is to have at least a couple of years of your cash flow needs completely liquid, money markets and things like that are going to be something you could get your hands readily on. And for Steve and Sandy, that might be $225,000 or so that they're going to have in that first bucket. Have another bucket that's still going to be in that more conservative modality there, and that's going to be another 5 years. So they might have as much as another $500,000 or $600,000 in that second bucket. That could be things like certificates of deposit, or could be something else that's going to maybe pay some interest or some dividends to help fill that first bucket up. But generally something that's going to be much more on the conservative side there. And then beyond that, they could start looking at some things that are going to be a little bit more growth oriented for the long-term ability to keep up with inflation. But what we can see here is that their situation does change pretty dramatically at age 68. So that's actually the year after Steve is eligible for Social Security, because he'll get a partial Social Security benefit in the year he turns 67, according to what we have in the plan there. So his cash flow does go down from $135,000 to $101,000. But by the time they're both getting Social Security benefits, they're looking at maybe just $23,000, $26,000, $29,000 as the long-term drawdown from the portfolio. So the way we generally like to look at this, and the way we've talked about it in some other videos, the way we look at it in the Retirement Time Machine Quick Start program, is we look at retirement in two phases. The retirement before your full retirement age, and what we see here generally with most people is some much bigger gaps. And then what does that retirement look like after full retirement age? And really almost need to plan for those two things completely separately so that you can make sure that you've accounted for that. And goal number one, obviously, would make sure you have enough to cover what you need from full retirement age through the rest of your lifetime. We run these plans out generally to age 95. But if you are in good shape there, you could look at doing an early retirement and see what you might need to cover those expenses in those years before your full retirement age. Okay, so that's it. So that's basically the software that we use, and hopefully they give you some ideas on how you can start to plan some of this stuff out, regardless of whether you're using software like what we have or you're just kind of doing this on your own through building out your own timeline. Very important to really understand some of those different moving pieces and maybe what those positive cash flows may look like as it gets closer to retirement, and what it also is going to look like when you have to start withdrawing money from your portfolio in those early years of retirement, and making sure that you've got a plan to cover some of those gaps and everything. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got a lot out of it. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, again, you can check out some of those links right below the video there. Check out the link for our Retirement Time Machine Quick Start if you haven't done that already. Again, that's completely free. It's a great place to begin. We're going to help you to organize some of this stuff. And then if you want to go on from there, you can go to our Retirement Time Machine program, where we've really helped you take a deep dive into all of these different things and help you build out a plan using the software that we just looked at. And this was just one of the reports that we have in there. I think there's really maybe 3 or 4 dozen different reports that are in there. We get into a lot of detail on not only cash flow, but really getting into tax planning, mapping out your assets, really helping you to figure a lot of this stuff out. So anyway, check out some of those links below, and I look forward to seeing you back in one of our next videos.